All right. Good evening, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 18th. Welcome. It's very nice to see everybody here tonight. Thank you for coming out in the rain. And let's go ahead and kick it off with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. So Stacy, I think we're going to start with the approval of the agenda. It's been moved and seconded. Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It passes. And now we are on to recognizing our own. So I will invite Dr. Kaczewski up.
Just call your name if you come forward. My left here for signature. We're going to start with the National Merit Commended Scholars. First, we have Jackson Leonard. Next, we have Oliver Pollock. Next is Saba Tamanaha. Next, we have the National Merit Semifinalists. First, we have Katie De La Paz. Next, we have Hannah Doe. Next, we have Beck Enzik Smith. Next, we have Anisha Durang. Next is Scott McCrary. Next is Ivy Reed. Next, we have Ishmael, Robles, Razek. Next, we have Samuel Rosenzweig. Alice Wang. Esther Wang. Elaine Yu. Is there anyone whose name didn't get called? Thank you. How about a round of applause for all of our great scholars? If we could quickly do a group picture with all of our commended and scholars and our national or semifinalists. Let's do it over there, kind of couch there. We'll just do a quick shot and then we'll be happy to send you. You're welcome to stay though.
Derek, free
And
to rush over and.
right.
Okay, Chris. Oh, I don't know. Chris, can I go back on? Yeah. Can we start? Can he hear me? Okay, we're back. Live. Okay. Do we have any public participation tonight? Comments? Okay, sorry, I can't see Chris. All right, then we are on to superintendent communications.
Perfect. Thank you. So I appreciated obviously all of our parents and students here who were here to be recognized for national merit. I thought that was a great event and they worked really hard. So it's a good thing that we were able to recognize them tonight. So I always like to start off with a few recognitions as well as in addition to the recognizing our own. I actually want to highlight one of the Wydown Middle School PE teachers, Christine Schneiderhan, was selected by SHAPE America Service and Lifetime Achievement Award committee to receive a legacy award. And what this was just a simple but yet really important recognition for her for all of the advocacy and work she does to provide equitable opportunities for our students. So we were very excited to recognize her. And she does a phenomenal job at the middle school for us. And she's even started to like promote all the activities that we do at the middle school and basically mirror what we do at the high school in terms of sending out newsletters, upcoming events. So it's really neat to see her and Steve Hudson at the high school start to align a lot of those activities. Because as we know, as the younger the kids are and the more active they are and engaged in activities outside of their schoolwork, the more successful they are academically as well. So it's a really good program and ideas that she's putting forth. So I definitely want to give her a shout out. We also, in addition to recognizing our national merit students, we also at the high school just 43 seniors were inducted into the National Honor Society. And so I know Dr. Gajewski had a faculty meeting, and I believe it was last week, or was that last Monday? Yeah, last Monday where we recognized our students and they got inducted into the National Honor Society. And then finally, we also recently had our diversity recruitment and networking event, and we partnered with Ladue to do that, and we do that every year, and we just change the location every year. So before we've had it here when we had it in person, and then it's been virtual the last couple of years. This year we finally were able to bring it back in person, and we had about 44 to 45 applicants that came in and were interviewed by our admin and Ladue's administrators. So it's a great event, and I want to thank Tony and the HR department for putting that together. So we appreciate all the work on that. And then finally, on Friday, we had our professional learning day for the district, and it was phenomenal. We had great feedback from it, and it was all the professional learning sessions that we had were aligned to our strategic goals 1 and 3. And as always, we always ask them to do a kick-up survey after these events so that we know, are we doing a good job? Do we need to change anything? So one of the questions we always ask them is, how are we doing in terms of specific topics, right? So if you look at this chart that I just wanted to highlight real quick, we had about, at this point, when we pulled the data, 88 people had turned in their responses, 82 responded to this particular question, but we always want to connect it to the profile of the Clayton graduate. Like the sessions that they attended, how did it connect back and did they learn from it? And this was their perception and information that they shared back with us in terms of the sessions they went to. And then another question that we ask, which I think is really important, is prior to attending the session, what was your knowledge level on that particular topic? And then after attending the sessions, what was your knowledge level on that? So according to this, 53% of the participants had a strong working knowledge in the areas covered prior to their experience in the professional learning. Afterwards, it was 86%. And then they also have the chances to answer other questions and give us their thoughts. And we really use those thoughts to really try and tweak and make adjustments to better suit their needs. And so I want to make sure I give a public shout out, especially to Milena, for putting all these professional learning events together, because there's a lot of planning work that goes behind this. And then for this event, Cameron and Robin really led all the work as well, because it was about goals 1 and 3. So really good feedback from our staff on this. And I think professional learning days are super important for obviously all of our staff and to be engaged in the work we do and aligning it. So it was a good day. And then I will hand it off to Carter to give us a student perspective.
Okay, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about the upcoming presentation from the student perspective on some of these governmental and political policies that are going on in Jefferson City. So we talked with some students and some teachers about what's been going on. Specifically, two of the policies that we really touched on were first, the ones that sort of was known to like be taking books off the shelves, and second, the one which banned the teaching of critical race theory. So first, like our initial reactions on these policies in general is that, I mean, like obviously we all believe that this is not really like the purpose of what the government should be doing. Like we've had teachers who said that it feels like they're stepping in and telling educators how to do their job when, you know, they don't really know that much about education necessarily. And we also thought that like, especially like even more so than what the bills seem to do on the surface, but the fact that they were opening up teachers to lawsuit and like putting the punishment on them was especially aggravating to us as students. So next we sort of talked a little bit about what our experiences have been as a result of these new governmental policies, and we actually have had teachers who have said that they used to be teaching certain subjects, but now they're not choosing to teach it anymore, and they've literally said that they're afraid of being sued. So I think that's a little bit of a warning call and shows us that there's stuff that needs to be done and stuff hopefully that we can do. Additionally, we've had some teachers who have been worried about taking books off of their own personal shelves in their classrooms. And also just some teachers and students feel like there's at times like a trade-off between a teacher feeling safe and like protected and them ensuring that kids get like a full and complete education, which is really sad. So in general, while Clayton has probably had a little bit less of felt a little bit less of an impact as a result of these policies, maybe some other districts have, it's still a cause for concern, we feel, and things that we can do. So specifically, some of the ideas which the group generated to see like what we could do as a school district and as a school board to address some of these new policies. First is just to continue to like sort of resist and not give in to these bills to the extent that we can. And second is something that we thought of was to regularly keep teachers, students, and parents all updated with new bills which may come out and how they impact our school district to make sure we're providing them with the information that they need so they really know what's going on and how it's impacting their kids. And finally, we also think that we should like make some sort of like pledge to teachers and students that like if issues do arise, that like the school district will defend them and like step in and protect them so they don't have to feel worried doing their job.
Well, those are good ideas. I think we agree with you. Does anybody have any questions, comments?
Sorry, I just want to say thank you. I think you bringing those to our attention like that, you discussing that in the way that you do with the students, it just really feels so important in terms of these issues. And I really appreciate the time that you put into this. It really makes a difference. So thank you.
And I was going to say, I wish that our legislators were here already to have heard that from you. And also, or maybe they're listening, maybe they're already on the Zoom, but also, I'm encouraged that students are engaged in this and interested, and maybe like we could really use students to actually fight some of this, you know, on district's behalf. So I'm so happy to hear how engaged you are in the work. So thank you.
All right. Well, now I guess we'll hear from, well, we're going to hear about we're going to do our legislative update. So we're going to hear from, Senator Carla May and, Reps Ian Mackey and Joe Adams. Our first time, right? Well, we'll be able to see them. Because I don't, yeah. There you go. Hi, Ian.
Hey, hello.
Are you on mute?
I'm not. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, hold on a
Okay.
sec.
Sure.
All right. Hold on 1 second,
Sure.
please.
All right, Ian, are you able to hear us okay?
I can. Yes. Uh-huh.
All right, great. I'm gonna turn up, we gotta turn up the volume on our end, so if you could stand by for just another second.
Sure.
Okay, I think we're ready to go.
Okay, great.
Okay, good. How you doing?
I am doing well. How are you?
We're good. Welcome. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for being here tonight.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll go ahead and start. So, yeah, but is he solo? Do we have? Anyone join? Nobody else in the waiting. Okay. All right, well, welcome, Ian, and thank you so much for being here tonight. And as I said earlier, the reason why Ian is up on our Zoom is because he has graciously agreed to give us a legislative update. And with that, I will let him go ahead and start.
Great. Thank you all. Yeah, I wish I could be there in person, but still in the Capitol. And yeah, but happy to chat about the start that session is off to. Today was the State of the State address from the governor. So we got an outline of what his priorities are, especially as they pertain to our state budget. And then, you know, we've had bills filed going back through December up until just a few hours ago related to issues that are going to be important to you all. And the first notice was sent out and just updated, in fact, this afternoon for the Elementary and Secondary Education Committee, which will be meeting next Wednesday and every Wednesday hereafter at 8 a.m. So our hearings are still at 8 in the morning, but rather than being on Tuesday, will be on Wednesday mornings. And our first hearing this Wednesday will deal with 3 different bills. 2 of those bills will be various forms of open enrollment policy for public schools. One filed by Brad Pollitt, who's the chair of the committee, and that's similar to legislation that he's filed in years past. It's a very detailed and prescriptive process for what he wants open enrollment for public schools to look like. And then there's a more sort of vague approach from the vice chair, Ben Baker, that leaves, it looks like, a little more control. I should say I've not had a chance to talk with these sponsors in detail about their bills. We've not had a chance to really dive into them, but my first reads of them, Ben Baker's bill looks to give schools a little more autonomy and a little more independent judgment. Both systems are voluntary, but Ben's is a much shorter bill that leaves, it looks like, a lot of decision making up to local districts. Brad seems to be a piece of legislation that's much more prescriptive. And then we'll have a third bill from Representative Chris Dinkins dealing with school safety officers, school protection officers. And it's pretty vague as well. Not really clear what her aim, what her goal is, but it looks like the beginning of a conversation around school safety, which is important, obviously, to all of us, and clearly a timely manner, especially for our region and really for everywhere. Will be, it looks like, having a discussion about one approach to that, which is perhaps increasing the number of school protection officers that we have in school buildings around the state. So those are the first 3 bills on the docket on the House side that we'll be hearing next week in the Education Committee. Today on the Senate side, there was a hearing, I believe, on Senate Bill 4, Senator Koenig's bill, who's the chair of the Education Senate Committee, dealing with Parents' Bill of Rights. That's a term we're all familiar with, especially, you know, given the legislation last session. There are a handful of bills filed in that space, not a ton, but a few. And it looks to be similar to what I just said with open enrollment policy, two different ways of thinking about how to go about this legislation from the people who have filed and sponsored these pieces of legislation. Senator Koenig's bill has a lot of language such as teacher shall, school shall not, school shall, teacher shall not. On the House side, Representative Krista Finelli, who's been a sponsor of these bills in the past, who has a pretty high profile here in the House, has a Parents' Bill of Rights that's much more vague. That's much more sort of honestly a reiteration of what parents already have the right to do, which is view the curriculum of their district, understand what's being taught in the classroom, right? Parents already have those rights. That's already happening in Clayton. That's already happening in lots of districts, and actually has some protections in there for students who may be facing danger at home, right? We're going to, rumors are we'll hear bills like have been heard in Florida that don't say gay bills, the anti-LGBT bills, bills like that in terms of, Florida's bill and others have required teachers to report students to parents who share information with them, such as coming out. Phil's bill actually has provisions to protect students in those situations. If they're at risk of facing harm at home, they're protected. Teachers aren't required to disclose that information. So there's actually a few good things in that. It's not a good bill overall. I don't want to give that impression, but there is some actually good protections in that. So we're seeing these two different approaches, the sort of firebrand approach we've seen in years past that really wants to just put the thumb down on schools and on teachers. And then another approach that's saying, look, we're going to give more discretion, more leeway to schools to try to figure out these problems. Obviously, we prefer the latter approach, and we'll continue to try to do what we can to work together with folks in the majority party to make sure that whatever passes is as least burdensome as possible. So that's sort of, I guess, a general overview of what we're looking at. We haven't seen any legislation so far that is the specific and narrowly tailored words that we've seen last year, such as you can't read these books, you can't teach from these professors or this line of law. We don't have any sort of specific curriculum bans or book bans or anything like that yet. Not to say we won't, not to say that fight isn't on the horizon, but we haven't had any of those bills filed yet. The governor today in the State of the State address made zero mention of any sorts of bans on curriculum or books or no mention of critical race theory, Parents' Bill of Rights. None of that came up in the governor's speech today. In fact, what did come up in the governor's speech and what has been a topic of conversation around the building is increasing teacher pay and increasing support for our schools and our teachers. I get the impression, it's just a guess, but I get the impression that a lot of my colleagues went home over the interim and heard from their teachers in their districts and heard from their superintendents and heard from folks who are working day in and day out in their schools who said, we need support. We need support. We don't need more burdens. We don't need more restrictions, more regulations, more liability. We need more support. I think that message is getting through. I hope it's getting through. That's at least the beginning of session. Obviously, a long way to go from here, but that's the beginning of session and what we're looking at.
All right, well, that's, thank you for that information. I'm glad to hear there's some of those more narrowly tailored bills aren't on the table yet, but we shall see what happens.
We shall see. Yes.
We shall see. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Go ahead.
Hi, Ian, it's Stacy. I don't know if you can see me in that in that picture. Thank you so much. I have a couple questions. One is, I think you said it's Brad, who's the chair of the committee.
Yes.
Who put forward one of the open enrollment bills.
Yes.
And he's done in the past. Is his bill any different than he's presented in the past? Did he make any changes this time?
My first read of it, there were some slight changes around some discretion for rejecting students. I feel like there was some changes. I haven't done a complete word for word comparison. It was just me trying to remember what I read last year and looking at what was, and I just saw it for the first time this afternoon. So trying to just try to think back to last session and look at what's going on here. There are some, looks like minor differences, but it looks like mostly the same.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious, like if it didn't pass last time, did he make some concessions and some changes this time. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, this is just a complete guess. It looks like he didn't make a ton of changes, and it looks like probably the folks who wanted more changes, looks like found Ben Baker.
Yeah.
It looks like Ben Baker's bill certainly provides some more autonomy and some more discretion to school districts than Brad's bill does. Brad's bill is much more of a prescriptive process. So I'm assuming the folks who weren't happy with Brad's bill and maybe still wanted to see something in this space, I'm guessing that's how Ben's bill came about.
So I realize you just got these and you haven't read through them. So you might not know the answer to this either, but one of the many concerns about these open enrollment bills is special education services. Did you notice if either one had any provisions, like anything about that in there?
So I'm trying to remember if there may have been I know Brad had some boilerplate Title VII language. You can't discriminate on the basis of X, Y, and Z, race, gender, those things. And I can't remember if he included disability. I do now recall the biggest change, I feel like actually in both of them, but especially in Brad's, is providing for transportation. I know that was a big change that was in Brad's. Brad has a big transportation piece to his, especially for districts that border, non-resident districts that border a receiving district have to provide transportation, and there's a mechanism for doing that in his bill. So I do remember that being different. I do not recall off the top of my head if he changed anything related to special education. That I would have to go back and look at.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So for those of us that don't know, can either Ian or Stacy, can you tell us how does special education play, why is that important? Can you?
Sure. Well,
I think
obviously
some of the people listening might not know how that plays into it.
It comes at a higher cost, right? That education comes at a higher cost. And so if you have a non-resident student seeking to fill an open enrollment seat in a receiving district, and that student requires special education services, that comes at a cost, right? And so that's one of these pieces that folks who are proposing this system are trying to solve for. And I do not recall how Brad specifically addressed that issue.
And there's, I guess, the fear that those schools that a parent would choose could refuse for that reason, I guess, could refuse based on their disability.
Right.
So there's a fear that they wouldn't really get to choose a school wouldn't have to accept them.
Got it. I see. Okay. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, how you doing, Ian? How's it
Hey, I'm
going?
good.
Good to hear from you, man.
You bet.
So I was reading about these firearm bills. There's a bunch of bills about school protection officers, teachers being deemed as protection officers, and just protecting firearms in schools. Pretty much that's what I'm reading. Can you talk more about that and how that looks in this current legislature that we're in right now?
Yeah, we're going to see, similar, I think, to years past and sort of the national discussion being mirrored. We're going to see proposals to basically give guns to adults in schools to, protect children, right? Ideally, and from the point of view of these bill sponsors, I think we probably agree. I certainly have the opinion that more guns in schools is not the solution. In fact, it's the opposite. So that discussion, I think, will play out. I think we're heading down the road to have a debate about whether or not how we protect our schools is providing more guns for folks to have in the school setting. That's not at all, I think, what the right approach is, but I do think we'll end up having that debate at some point. I do also, though, think we're going to have a lot of support and a lot of resources. At least the governor would want that. He mentioned it in his State of the State today, more financial resources and support for mental health professionals and counselors in our school settings. That is something we all agree on. We don't all agree on how many guns and how many folks should be armed in our schools, but we do agree that we need more trained and licensed mental health professionals in our schools to work with children who are at the most risks of committing acts of violence. And so I do hope that is where the conversation, I hope that's where consensus is on this conversation. I do think there'll be a lot of noise about arming teachers or arming any types of school personnel. I think there's folks that want to arm any sort of person who wants to go into a school setting. And, you know, I hope that's not where we end up. I hope the consensus is around providing support for mental health resources and our counselors and other folks who are providing mental health support for students and for staff.
And there's also some bills about, well, I guess it's called curriculum prohibition and requirements, right? So there's like a bunch of Senate Bill 42. Do you know about this bill? About the number?
The numbers, I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
No, I don't. Senate Bill 42 is not ringing a bell off the top of my head, but tell me about it.
Critical race theory, which is what Cara just talked about.
Yeah.
Let's see. Divisive concepts. There's a bill, Senate Bill 172. This is sponsored by Republican or Representative Brian Seitz.
Yep. Yeah.
So can you talk more about any of those types of bills? Because those seem like they're pretty. There's several.
Yeah. So there, yes, no, there's a handful of these pieces of legislation that have that boilerplate broad language about not teaching, like you said, divisive concepts, quote, divisive concepts, not teaching in their terms, in their bill language, not teaching that one race is inherently superior or inferior to another, right? We are definitely going to see those sorts. We're going to see those bills probably at some point, whether they're in a committee setting or whether they're as amendments on the floor. There is a faction, Brian Seitz leads it among others in the House. There'll be folks in the Senate who do the same, who want to push that forward. That is incredibly vague language. That is not language that says you cannot teach this book. You cannot teach this curriculum from this company. You cannot teach the words of this professor. You cannot, right? We saw that legislation last year. And other states have seen that legislation, very specific, narrow targeted bans on authors and on pieces of literature. Their approach so far has been that vague language, right? You can't tell white students that they are oppressors. You can't tell white students that they're bad. You can't make them feel guilty, right? That's how they look at this framework. That's how they look at sometimes a lesson around equity. That's how sometimes some of these few folks who sponsor these pieces of legislation view that conversation. We'll have that debate. We'll have that discussion. I don't know what the end result will be, but that language is as vague as can be, right? That language is as open to interpretation as just about anything else we could pass here. We know the intent behind it, right? We know what Brian Seitz means when he says that, but honestly, that doesn't matter. His intent is irrelevant. His reason for sponsoring that bill, what he intends or means for that bill to do, is completely irrelevant. The only thing that matters is what that bill says. The only thing that matters is the words that are in that statute when they're signed by the governor and put into law. That's it. That's all that matters. And I really want folks to keep that in mind. So if you pass, if a piece of legislation passes and says you can't tell, you can't make one group think this or that. Well, of course, who's going to do that? What teacher has the capability, let alone the desire to make somebody think a certain ideology or belief? That's not the business of education. That's not what our teachers are doing. That's not what schools are doing. So forget Brian Seitz's intent, forget Andrew Koenig's intent, forget what motivates these bills, and just read the words and go from there. And I think we'll be okay. I hope that's where we end up.
And one last one, there's also a bill about that pertains to parents being able to pull their students out of class if they disagree with the information. So
Yes.
It's kind of a separate, but so how does that look? That looks pretty detailed.
So that was, I recall seeing that legislation in Phil Cristofanelli's bill. Phil, however, requires that the parent provide the alternative setting, if I recall correctly. His legislation requires the parent to find something to do with their child, which, if you're going to do it, I mean, I'm not for a heckler's veto. I'm not for having every parent, I'm not for having a parent every hour have a heckler's veto on what's being taught in class and, creating an alternative setting for their kid or this kid or that kid. At least in Phil's legislation, it's on the parent to figure out what to do. It's not up to the school. It's not up to the teacher. Again, I'm not I don't want to advocate for Phil's position. That's not my position, but he at least puts the onus on the parent to find something to do. So, you know, if that's where they end up, it's better than other places where it's better than the school having to do it, right? It's better than every single teacher, or every single administrator every hour trying to say, okay, well, we got one kid in this class who needs an alternative setting. Another kid in this class needs another one. Another kid in this class needs another one. That's unsustainable, right? And I think he realizes that. I don't know if others do in his party or folks who are going to lead the conversation, but you know, I think, like I said at the beginning, I think a lot of these folks went home over the interim and heard from their schools, heard from their teachers, heard from folks in their communities who said, you know, we need your support. We don't need you micromanaging our day to day. We don't need you dictating to us how we're going to proceed day to day in our school setting. We need you to support us in our job and trust us to teach your kids and to help raise this community. And so I think that's what we're seeing.
Thank you very much, Ian. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Gary.
Hi, Ian. It's Gary Pearson. Thanks for being with us again and for updating us on this. Appreciate your attention to these things and being with us. You mentioned the education committee, you know, sort of regular meeting times, and I don't think you were on the line yet, but we heard from our student rep some conversation about what Clayton High School students were doing and talking about and thinking about with some things that happened in the past years that might be happening this year in terms of voicing their opinions about things that the legislature might be doing. Can you just speak to what the best ways are for people to keep up to date with what might be happening that affects education, and how they should know when to show up, if they should want to show up and voice their opinion and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will send out my first email legislative update probably tomorrow, maybe Friday, sometime here in the next couple of days. And I know most of you are on it. Forward it to anybody you think is interested. If somebody wants to join it, just email my house account and tell me you want to be on it, and I'll add you to the list. That will have a detailed explanation every week and as things develop in the meantime about what bills are coming to the education committee. And I'm glad Jason brought up firearms. You know, I'm really focused on just that committee, but obviously we're concerned about other spaces and other committees where some of this legislation that affects school settings may not necessarily always come through the education committee. So I know we'll have students from CVPA, Central Visual Performing Arts, down here in the next couple of weeks in the building, meeting with lawmakers, talking about their experiences going through that school shooting and what that looks like, and what support they need from the legislature. So, you know, I know that every time students are in the building and other folks in the community are in the building sharing their stories and talking to lawmakers, that always moves the needle in the right direction. That is the slow process of changing hearts and minds and finding consensus that we're looking for. And so I look forward to being in touch with the student rep, with other students who are interested in having a physical presence in the state capitol during session, and whether that's showing up to a committee hearing and speaking for 2 or 3 minutes about their story and why they're here, or whether that's just walking around and finding folks to meet with and to talk to about their experiences. That really, you know, we saw last year, the first hearing out of the gate in January last year was specific bans on curriculum, specific bans on authors and on books. And we had folks fill the room, and it stalled that legislation for weeks. It watered it down, it put it in a better place, and ultimately it didn't even pass. So that hearing is what did that. And having folks physically in the building to share their stories is really what we need. And so, yeah, I absolutely look forward to doing that. And in terms of keeping up, you know, as it moves along, I'll try to do that by email as quickly as possible.
I appreciate that, Ian. And my second question was going to be what other committees or what other settings should be things that people keep an eye on. So I know that
Sure.
can be difficult to predict, but appreciate your efforts to keep us informed and on all these topics. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep an eye on those too. You know, I would say the General Laws Committee, the Emerging Issues Committee, and potentially the Crime and Public Safety Committee, which I also sit on. Those three will from time to time hear, especially our gun-related legislation. Often that may go through the Crime Committee this year, or it may, as it has in the past, go through the General Laws Committee or maybe the Emerging Issues Committee. Those are definitely issues to watch in those committees.
Great. Thanks, Ian.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Hey, Ian, thanks for coming again. I just have a quick question on both of the
parents' bills of rights bills. The Post Dispatch had an article, a brief article about it, about how both bills, regardless of the detail in the bill, required the state to establish some type of transparency portal. Do you have any insight into what that looks like? Is that the existing like Students First portal that is already kind of out there with the Sunshine Law requests, or is it something separate and unique from that?
That is not clear. That is, I think, going to take a lot of question and answer time in our first committee hearings. That is something I've already talked to colleagues of mine about to try to wrap our heads around. It's not really clear. And I don't even know if it's clear to the bill sponsor what they want that to look like or what they expect that to be. We've had bill sponsors in the past say, we want every single lesson plan scanned in electronically and put up on a school website, right, or in some portal. And we've had other folks say, we just want to know what the curriculum says. Like there's, obviously a wide range of what folks expect that to look like and what they want that to be. That is truly an unanswered question and something that I hope we'll get an answer to in our first committee hearing on Wednesday.
Okay, because
Next
certainly,
Wednesday.
what I think we would worry about as a board as a board is the administrative burden on our administrative teams here.
Yep.
And the extra, potential costs associated with meeting whatever the requirements of that portal is. So
Yep.
as you guys are debating through the mechanics of the legislation, some of that administrative burden underneath it is, if it's a simple matter of just, a link to our website for the school district, that's one thing. If it's, as you said, every lesson plan, every curriculum instruction for every grade at every grade level, or, what are we teaching in European history versus then that's a totally different animal. So,
Right.
and I think we would want to be involved in, making that trek to talk to those committee members and putting groups together to make sure that we have a voice at the table for that stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay. Go ahead, Carter.
Hi, Ian, this is Carter. Thank you for coming. So my first question is, now that the Liberty School, I forget, Independence perhaps, one of the school districts switched to 4 days a week. And I know like other school districts across the country are also having to make that switch. Do you think that this will sort of switch these lawmakers' mindsets so they'll sort of be less focused on making teachers' jobs harder with these restrictive legislation? And just can you speak to how you expect this to impact the bills?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is, I think there's the question about why schools are moving to 4-day school weeks. And I think in the beginning, that was a financial constraint that was placed on some schools. And I think in the beginning of the movement toward a 4-day school week, we saw the impetus of that really being a financial concern, which is obviously incredibly disappointing and sad and frustrating. And schools should not be forced to close 1 day a week because they can't afford to stay open 5 days a week. But that conversation has really shifted over the time that this has been happening. And, the experience from some schools that have had 4-day weeks has been positive. Parent surveys have been positive, community surveys have been positive, teacher surveys have been positive, although that is changing in some districts where now they're requiring teachers to come in and be at school the 5th day, and they're creating these settings for students who don't have anywhere to go, and then it ends up kind of being a quasi 5-day week. That's an issue, but I think this is really still an emerging topic and an emerging issue to think about and to wrap our heads around. I don't think that there's any clear direction right now as to whether or not Independence was by far the largest district to go down this route. They're one of the largest districts in the state. And it certainly made waves when they made this decision. We'll see if a district that size has the same sort of, to my knowledge, I don't think we've seen schools go 4 days and then decide they want to go back to 5. I think the ones who have done it have stuck with it. So we'll wait and see. I don't think it's going to have necessarily too much of an impact on the other legislative issues we're seeing, like the ones we've discussed tonight. I don't think that the 4-day week is necessarily playing into those, except for perhaps the issue of teacher pay.
Interesting. And then second, you spoke about how students would might have the opportunity to come down and speak at legislative sessions, which I know myself and some other classmates are definitely interested in. But can you speak to some other ways that students could get involved and sort of make sure that their opinions are being heard?
Sure. I think in the past, Clayton has done a great job of bringing these concerns and these issues to your peers, to your community. I think especially around the issues of gun violence, around the issues of racism, students at Clayton have, I think, done an excellent job of bringing these issues to the forefront for their peers and for your community in your school setting, and inviting the press to come and cover it, getting that story out there. Whether it's marching down Down, whether it's organizing something in the building, whether it's writing to the local papers, getting that story out there and putting your voices forward, I think in your own community is also hugely important.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I think that there are no further questions. So, Ian, thank you for being here tonight. And we would love for you to come back sometime during the session and update us as more information materializes. And just keep us informed. We'll make sure, and we look forward to your emails, but it's really helpful, I think, to have you here
Yeah.
to answer questions. So we appreciate your time.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it. And yeah, there'll be much more to talk about as session gets going. And yeah, I look forward to being back. Absolutely.
Great. So maybe like when you think it's a good time,
Yep.
if you can let me know and we'll get it on the agenda.
Great. I will do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
All right. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye. Let's go ahead and take a very short 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene. So we are now on to the first reading of policy BDDF, which is the voting method. Is that right? Okay. Okay.
And what? Change the abstention of the motion or vote. Abstain. I think. And then the other one is basically spelling that if there's a appointment, you have to show four board members. All four. At this, there's. Question.
I do. Thank you for this. So first of all, I read this a second time this afternoon. The way it reads to me, and I'm the newbie still, it is changing the what happens with someone who votes in abstention. It seems like before, the way it reads is that that's the idea of taking away a vote if you vote in abstention, is the equivalent of not voting, that's a change. Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
Because I thought I heard you say that that's not a change, it's clarifying language.
No, they're, what MSBA is trying to do, they're. For it was. That.
Okay. Is that a change in practice for how we've considered it as a board? It's not. Okay.
It's really a question of how many affirmative votes you need, and an abstention not lowering the number to get to a majority, which I think it could have been perceived that happened before. I don't think that was ever actually the case, but this clarifies that it doesn't lower the threshold to get to a majority.
So-
Yeah.
Well,
it's
okay,
exactly-
okay, you may have to talk to me like,
Yeah.
like I'm, a kindergartner here.
Well, if you,
Right, but if let's say a vote is 3 yes, 2 no, and 2 abstain, does it pass?
it doesn't pass, there's not a majority.
Passes unless it is contrary.
Okay, so specifically
So it's only for contracts and employments that you need the majority of total board members
When-
that you have to have for.
when it's specified that it's a majority of the board to approve, then it doesn't change. An abstention wouldn't change that, but that's not the case with every motion. I think that's what you're saying, right?
But you also have to remember that.
We may need a diagram, a flow chart. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
You'll remind us if it's one of those cases that.
Yes.
Well, and the approving contracts or employment, that's I think this is true, by state statute. I think it specifically references a majority of the Board of Education has to approve it. But that's why,
So that's always 4.
right,
Well, I'll just say that, for me, from my perspective, at least, you can probably not with this group, but you can envision sometime down the road where you have that scenario where something controversial comes up for whatever reason, unexpected, and it's 3-2-2 and it passes. And are we okay with that? It's really the question.
Well, it won't pass if it has to do with contracts or.
Right, but if it's a policy though, right? Are we okay with that?
well, I mean, I don't have my copy of Robert's rules here, but I think that is actually the case now. without this
It
clarification.
is, okay.
This is clear.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also need to remember that when MSBA provides this with specific to like.
Oh, yeah, I got that.
Pretty sure. You have always done it.
Mhm.
This is just.
Well, if we follow.
That's how it is.
Well, we follow Robert's rules of order, and that's what it is, then. Okay, I'm done.
Ask Gary for any Robert's Rules questions.
But give me a little heads up, will you?
All right, thank you, Heike, for that. And then policy BDDL, which is release of information. Yes,
The main change that. I don't. Sunshine. I'm the custodian record for the district. Whenever we get sunshine law, whatever call it, I have to follow the law. It's being moved out of policy, put into. That's.
go ahead.
Yeah,
Please,
yeah, so
sorry.
I want to make sure, yeah, we can clarify that a little bit, because I was looking at it. And I was like, they really pared this thing down to
Yes.
like. Then, which also eliminated some of the things that I know. When there's been requests before. That aren't in there. I want to make sure I understand what that means for. Our policy and what it means for the procedural part. And what it means legally, I guess. Micah.
So. The language that they took out. Is being moved into the term, which okay, but
So we're moving into the procedure or what?
I'm sorry,
Like we're moving it into our procedures?
yes, we're moving it out of policy and in. Because it's something I have to follow the law. So when somebody sends me a records request, sunshine law, or sunshine. Matter. It's in policy. They're doing is they're moving it out of policy in. Just know what the steps are,
Mhm.
but it doesn't need to be policy. I don't know if I'm.
No, yeah, I think you are. So let me ask you, does one of these things have more deference over the other? Does
It
one of
really
them,
doesn't because I have to follow it.
right,
I have the 3 days to respond.
because that is the law.
That's the law.
So then
If
why
I
are they
can't-
taking it out of the policy then? And why are they paring it down to just this simple language? Do you know? Like, does anyone know what the origin of this? That's what I was struggling with. Like, why are they doing this?
I think it's common to have, you have a policy and then you have procedures that, define how you execute on the policy. So I think that's, whether it's this policy or other policies, I think it's common to, you set the policy and then you have the procedures which back up the policy and explain it's like kind of the how you do it or the process for it, that a lot of times doesn't get embedded within the actual policy.
Yeah, I think I was just struggling with the idea of what was the reasoning? Like, what's the origin of this? And why would they do this? Because I'm always thinking there's some kind of ulterior motive.
Yeah.
There's always some kind of move someone's trying to make, and that could put me in a trick bag. And so I like to know before I say yay to things like, why are we doing this? And so we don't know. So there's no real. I mean, your explanation is great, and so is yours. I get it at that level, but I still don't understand like the why.
On the
What?
specific policy.
Yeah, like why would they do this on it? Because this is a pretty serious policy for us as a board. I mean, this is a thing that I know that happens, and these tactics are important. So I want to understand like why, and we can just kind of find out like the why, and what does it mean extrapolating this language out, then putting it in the procedure, and then this being the policy with that pared down language. I would like to know why.
I think that Heike could probably call MSBA and get that information pretty
Yeah.
quickly, and then report back to us at our second meeting, second reading of the policy.
That's cool.
Um,
Because there was nowhere on the nowhere on any website or anywhere was like the reasoning. I just couldn't get it. So
I know one of the reasons that sometimes they do update policies besides just a legislative change or et cetera, is if they're getting a lot of requests for clarification on a specific policy from tons of school districts. So then all of a sudden they laser focus on that policy and go, why are we getting so many questions on this policy?
Right.
And they clarify the language on it. So that is one thing I know MSBA does. But I don't know if that's the case for this policy. We'll call them and ask them.
well, and this also goes back to like these books being pulled, you know, and then someone saying like our attorney general saying I want to do a sunshine law request on all these things, and then now this isn't in the policy; it's over here, and like they could just come in and do what they want to do. I just want to make sure that's not the case. Like there's no weird stuff happening that we don't understand. If that makes sense. Before we agree to this.
okay, well, we can certainly get that info and share it at the next reading of this. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I just was gonna
sorry,
say quickly.
I'm not
It,
looking for
it looked
Jason.
to me like a lot of, it's been a couple days since I looked at it, but I feel like a lot of what was struck out of this was like such redundant. The statements were so redundant, it almost made me think like, how and what, like, when this was written in the first place, who proofread this? Like, it was like, it seemed very redundant. So some of the paring down is probably, innocent like that. But I do think Jason brings up a really good point that the motive behind these is always important to know.
Go ahead.
Just a question. I'm not sure it's fair to even ask this question, but I'm going to do it anyway. So under the board member access,
Yes.
how is it decided whether the request is related to a board member's duties or not? Do you make that call, or the person does the
So-
custodian of records make that call?
If it's a request, just like any request for and bonded back with board member.
Okay. So it's your call, and that's not a bad response. I'm just trying to clarify. It's your call to make as the custodian of record.
As a custodian of records, I'm bound by law.
okay.
It's not real. I don't
Yeah.
get to pick and choose which one.
No. I didn't. Nor would I think you would. I just
Yeah.
I just wanted to know. All right. Cool. Thanks.
But that is a good part of the policy that the board does need to make sure they read, because that's an optional part. If we want to add that into the policy or not. With the board member access to records, like.
Chris, are you, okay, anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Micah, and we are now on to our action item number 8, which is these policy DIAA.
Mhm. I move that the Board of Education approve policy DIAA relating to fund balances.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there questions? Nothing. Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And now we are on to our financials for November 2022. Is
John.
John gonna?
John, did you have anything to share for the financial report for November 2022? Nothing beyond that's written.
Okay, and so there's no action on that. Well, it looks like we do need a motion. We do need to, Stacy, I'm sorry, approve the November 2022 disbursements.
Right. I move that the Board of Education approve the November 2022 disbursements in the sum of $2,605,508.37.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions?
I'm just wondering if we're having any luck recovering the close to $95,000 for the substandard contractor work done on the roof. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a contractor, do you know, that we've used for a long period of time that has an incentive to pay us all back that money?
I don't
My
think,
understanding, contractor. Awesome. So there's variety. There's lawyers. City. Okay.
Okay. Mm-mm.
Aye.
any opposed? Okay,
Amy,
Yeah.
I'd like to abstain on
You-
this, on the disbursement report. Is that what we're,
yes, okay. Did you abstain?
My question is, when it's not a roll call vote,
Mhm.
do we just get to not vote or do we
So-
have to recognize, like, you know?
What I should have done was, I should have said something before Stacy called the motion and you guys would have excused yourself from
Oh,
the room
oh,
and then come back in, when after the vote. But I know that you did text me before, so I apologize that I forgot. But I guess if it's, go ahead and you can mark it as, you could say, yeah, abstain. So you've got 4.
The key is to not participate in the vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but in the scenario you just gave, you said we would come back after the vote, so we wouldn't even vote. Is that what? should have
Yeah, I
happened?
mean, that's like,
Okay, I see.
I don't know that I don't think it's problematic that you were sitting here.
Yeah.
I actually don't think there's any policy about physically leaving. the room.
Yeah, I just,
I like,
just-
we used to do that in
with
practice,
Joe,
but we didn't,
yeah,
we didn't have to do that.
Right,
It just ensures that you don't vote. if you're not in the
Right.
room.
Okay.
Do the roofing?
Totally. Yeah, I'm really bad at roofing, apparently.
job, Chris.
Sorry.
So I guess just to clarify, Amy, like before
With you and your roofing.
every vote, should you be saying like all those in favor, all those, and then all those abstain? Like,
I mean,
or how
I,
should that normally,
all those in favor, and then when I say any opposed,
someone could abstain then?
yeah, I guess I would say, would
And
you agree?
anyone can clarify a roll call vote if they think it's unclear who voted which way.
Yeah.
So-
So I think we just clarified it the way that Jason brought it up and
Okay,
Chris
yeah,
brought it
I
up. So I
abstain.
think that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know what, like, remember Joe used to.
Yeah.
but he didn't
have people-
That was his.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a making sure if you're not in the room, then there's no question whether you participated in the vote.
Okay. So we're on consent.
I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda items 10.02 through 10.05.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Let's see here, are we? I think we need to approve. We're on, Stacy, do we need to approve? Or no, I'm sorry. No, that was all in consent. That was all in consent. Okay, so we're on board communication. Does anybody have any reports? Go ahead.
Unless Jason wants to talk on this, we'll grow. So I was on the legislative advocacy call. I think you were on it too. That's why I was saying. Or if you want to talk about anything, but I think Jason Grow and I were the only ones on that Zoom call, and Nisha was also. So those legislative advocacy group calls, we had one, I don't know, recently, and Ian covered most of what we heard. And I think, do you know, Heike, was the whole board emailed that slide deck or just Jason and I that attended? Does anyone know? You know how we got a email with,
I don't remember getting.
oh, I feel like I did. Okay. Or was it in the weekend update? Okay, so if you haven't had a chance to look through it, I would. And if you are interested in this and like what Ian was talking about tonight, I would encourage you to join the next one, which is coming up in February. I think the first Friday in February. It's just a Zoom call. I didn't even have my camera on. I was listening while I was walking my dog. So, you know, it's not like you have to be sitting at your desk, but I found it very informative and engaging. And there's some really knowledgeable people on that call. Anyway, and I would just say that I think I was just looking at my notes. Ian covered pretty much in his talk most of the same, you know, things, important things that we heard on the call. I would say there was kind of a push to say that we kind of long gone are the days where we just can rely on superintendents to do the advocating for our public school districts, that we really need to get students and community members and others involved in it. Mostly because I think he said some kind of statistic, like half of the superintendents in Missouri are like in their first 2 years in the position. Like they're young and they are overwhelmed with their new job as it is. So the community really needs to get on board to help with this. And I think one more thing, I think that maybe is not an issue for Clayton, but across the board in education in Missouri is that the rate of teacher retention is like at a record low and early retirement at a record high. And so I think even if we're not dealing with this issue in Clayton, it's important to be aware of that when we think about how some of these laws will affect these districts that are having a really hard time retaining and hiring teachers. So anyway, the next one's coming up, I think the first Friday in February. So if you're free at, I forgot if it was 8 a.m. maybe on Zoom, like I said, even if you're just doing other things and want to listen in, I think they're great. It's very helpful for me, I guess.
I think, are they on our calendars?
If you told Heike that.
Yes, I see. Okay.
Maybe Heike could just put them on everyone's
Yeah.
calendar. And so then if you can attend, you will. And if you don't, you don't. Like, does that sound good, Heike? Like maybe just send everyone the links on the calendar because there's, I think, 3 more scheduled for this school year.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be in person, so we didn't want to overwhelm it with, you know, all 7 of us, but now that they're just
Right.
Zoom, there are more people from other districts I've noticed that show up too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's great to see that. So.
Yeah. And even Carter, that could be some, I don't know what time does school start?
15.
Okay,
Do you
well,
have a first and
some of you
fifth
guys I know sleep in till like 9:30. So, well, I don't know. They don't have a class in the morning. So, I mean,
Heard it here first. School starts at 9:30.
They do.
Amy's calling you in for an
For some
unexcused absence.
kids.
Or for an excused absence.
but no, but your group, don't you have a legislative or a committee?
Yeah.
That you can, if somebody doesn't
somebody's
have
free.
that hour, they can log on. Yeah,
Make a cha for that.
I don't think it's gonna be cha-cha, but
It would basically probably be 5th period because it's a
Yeah,
PD day. It's
yes.
Friday mornings. It's always a Friday at 8 a.m. So that would always. Right, that's
yeah.
true.
And even
But if we do, it's a B day.
better
So it's a.
opportunity.
I mean, it's 8 a.m. What are you going to be doing?
Yeah, well, I'm not saying Carter has to do it. He can see if somebody is
Yeah,
interested in it.
Sophia or somebody else.
Yeah,
What, can I ask a question?
yes.
Stacy, did they focus? I have a couple different thoughts and a question first is, do they talk at all about how to rally and inform, sort of like what Gary was saying, your district's parents and students around this stuff? Is that what I was hoping that instead of just informing us, the people that got on the Zoom, that this would be a nice forum for us to understand exactly how to raise our parent voices and help parents to be more involved and to know what's happening so that they can go down to the Capitol. And, you know, I just wonder if other districts have I know at the conference, I certainly talked to other districts that even go so far as to have a lobbyist for them. But I just think that we're all kind of sitting in our like heels, like, oh gosh, what's going to happen? And we're knowing that we need feet on the ground. And we know that can't always be us, but what can we do to support the people in the district? A, knowing about all this stuff, B, really supporting them being able to organize around it if that's where the, energy wants to be, which I
Yeah.
think it is in Clayton.
They didn't talk about it on this call. I believe I remember in the past we have. And I also know that the board PLC, the school boards, professional learning community, like that Joe had started that happens. The last one of that, which was last spring, maybe that was the focus, was like talking about how to do that and what to do. And my personal opinion or wish would be that not even just in Clayton, but with some of these districts in our area that are on this call, like the Webster, the Kirkwood, U City, like that we band together, because I think there's strength in numbers, especially when you're showing up in Jeff City.
Yeah.
So maybe we bring that up on the next call, like how could we as a collective
Right.
group?
And I just wonder, my next
Join
comment
forces.
is the idea that I actually just thought of, but is there a place for us as a board to have a bit of a subcommittee with, whether it has a board member or not, but to have a subcommittee that sort of studies how we can approach this budding need for our district. I mean, for all districts, I would say, especially the ones here in St. Louis County. So I don't know. I just wondering out loud if I hate for us to say, wouldn't it be great if we could support parent voice and then not really have much more action on that rather than just saying it. I just wonder if there's.
Yeah, we've talked about in the past having like a legislative advocacy kind of
Because it's
committee,
a thing, yeah.
like our financial advisory committee.
Yes,
We never
exactly.
really.
Because at this
Did
point,
it.
we don't really
I
have those
think-
subcommittees. I wondered if this is a case
Yeah.
to have one. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that in the past, the problem that we've discussed is that, that becomes political, the legislative advocacy. And, some of our community feels one way and some of the community feels it another way. And it might be hard to have, you can't exclude people. So it might be hard to have both.
Right.
You know.
And so I wasn't saying that we would hold a position on any of these topics. I was saying, what can we do to inform and therefore help them to be their own position, whatever that position is.
Sure.
So not be political about it, but also be informative about it, or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
I think there's some things that we could probably be doing better. And I'm sure Nisha and Chris can talk about, I mean, I don't know, like even just, putting Ian's access to Ian's emails on our website and, yeah, I'm sure, I mean, I don't know that we need to come up with the how, but if it's important to everybody that, which I think it is that we are informing the community of legislative activity.
I mean, just think of the example he just
Sure.
gave about last year.
Yeah.
And how much that made a difference for that bill. It got stalled and then it ended up not passing at all.
Yeah.
I just think, sounds to me like the students are very wanting to be involved, and that probably means the parents and maybe teachers
Yeah.
too. So again, without us taking a
Yeah.
actual stand, there has to be a way for
Just
us.
informational.
Yeah, and really
That's
all
what's
it
going on.
is we can just call it elevating parent, education. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe. Let's just start. I feel like let's start brainstorming, or have you, really think about what that could look like.
Right.
Pretty interesting space.
I mean, I guess,
Well, I don't know. What's the which?
No, I'm just saying, like, I love Chris's enthusiasm.
Like, Yeah, yeah.
Like, I think always been. Four. Always been.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jason, I love it when I love to hear your thoughts, but if we're going to have that conversation, we should probably have it on the agenda. So if any of our community wants to hear it, that's something that we can consider.
Looking at different ways. They can be more aware.
Yes.
Without taking it.
Yes, I mean, they
Yeah.
could advocate however they want.
Exactly.
People can advocate however they
Exactly.
choose to advocate.
Exactly.
Right, I mean, certainly as a board, we can
Generalize.
we could, collectively say how it collectively as a board that we feel, but
Which we
and
have with certain
right, and some
resolutions, right?
community members will agree with us and some community members will disagree with us.
Right.
And,
But it's really
they
just
do
sort of a
with- do
community
what they will with
service
the
in some
information.
ways.
Yeah.
We're acting as, a group of concern, people who are committed to our education, in helping our community know how this affects them as well. And obviously, we're doing it because we know that we have students and that are really passionate and we want to support the students as well.
Mhm.
So again,
Yes.
it's not about picking a side. It is about saying, this is important to education and here's how we're going to, make sure that our students, teachers and parents have a chance to engage in whatever form they want to.
Right, exactly.
And I think there's also a way to just speaking strictly factual, if Bill XYZ passes, here's how it will affect our community.
It's huge. It's huge.
Just, that's factual. That's
just
not
right.
political.
Yeah, there's
That's
nothing
not
political
picking a
about that.
side. That's just explaining what's going to happen.
So again, what does that look like, Nisha?
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't,
Yeah, and
again,
I
I'm
think
not
that
coming
we
up-
could
I'm-
put that on the agenda.
Kristen, I can.
Yeah, and then
Yes.
present the board with, or update us.
in one of
Some-
those
some
future meetings,
communications
I
or
wondered if,
superintendent
again, we can just
communications
ask
or
that
something.
question of the other districts. What are you guys doing? What does this look like in
Sure.
your district?
And
Yeah.
those meetings are very, there's a presentation usually, but then there's discussion. Like it's
Great.
very open to
It's great.
anybody being able to ask that. It's a very
I'm sorry I couldn't get to the last one, but
inclusive call.
Yeah,
you know,
I'll go to the next.
anybody can talk.
Okay, so so I'm hearing that everybody is interested in this and making sure that the community is informed. And so I'm sure, we can either put it on the agenda in some form, or it could be part of superintendent communications. I think that's a good idea. So thank you guys both of you for stressing that. Are there any other reports? Go ahead.
So I attended the Clayton Education Foundation meeting last week or 2
And
weeks
how
ago.
was that, Jason?
It was great. We heard two proposals. We heard one from Cameron Poole, who's putting together a really exciting bus tour of HBCUs for our students. And it was really cool to hear about that work, what he's doing. So I appreciate that. Then we
Will you
also,
tell us quickly what that means, what that stands for, and what? Do you know?
oh,
Yeah,
historically black,
Yeah.
historically black colleges.
What
and
you told me
universities.
the other day, because I didn't know, or Cameron could tell us.
No, I mean, about the bus tour.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So correct me if I'm wrong, it was taking a group of juniors, I believe, through sophomores, okay, on a bus tour through the South to various HBCUs, so historically black colleges. So that they can get exposure to those campuses, learn more about those schools and more about those post-secondary opportunities.
Amazing. I love it.
Yeah,
Good job,
So-
Cameron. I think that's awesome.
thanks, Cameron.
Seriously, I love that.
During spring break?
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Is it during spring break? The week after.
And then we also heard a proposal about, and I'm new to this, being the guy with Merrimack kids, but the Jekyll Island trip, which tends to be like an annual sort of thing. So we heard a proposal about that. And I don't know how I didn't know what they decided to do at that meeting. But again, just wanted to thank Cameron for stepping up on that. And then also this Friday is alumni basketball night. So if you know anyone who played basketball for Clayton at any time, they're gonna do something, I guess, to honor those players, and they're gonna have a little get together afterwards at a bar nearby. And so if you know anyone, invite them to the game on Friday.
Okay. Great.
I will say my report too, just quickly, briefly, I just wanted to make sure that we did have another equity committee meeting and it was great. And we're still doing the same stuff that we were before. And I'm really glad to be a part of it. So just nothing real new, just that Jason and I both went to this last meeting and we're still doing the good work, and we'll report more once we look at more data and have more recommendations.
Wonderful. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Well, I guess we will adjourn.
I move that the Board of Education adjourn.
Second.
Okay,